but in a way, in a sense, to make it more real.
Yeah.
You made it more unreal in terms of the moral enhancement phases that currently occur. And the point I want to put to you and your group, obviously, is it seems to be, from the outside, and I'm not a psychiatrist, it seems to be there is a division between whether psychiatric patients are mad or bad. And insofar as they're bad, they ain't mad. And insofar as they're mad, they ain't bad. So I think there is a tension between keeping it in, if you keep it in that context, and you're begging the question about, so to speak, what the relationship between illness, sickness, and wickedness is.
I agree. Those concepts are, of course, very interesting in themselves. I think, generally speaking, people that are treated in these correction settings are considered mad alongside that, or only mad that they have. And I think it directly corresponds to this professional flow. So if you're only bad, it's only criminal justice, it's only punishment, it's only... But that was my question.
Insofar as you're restoring them to health, you're not necessarily, it would be odd to think that you're restoring somebody to health and making a difference to their, so to speak, to their moral compass.
So treating a disorder is different from morally enhanced.
Well, it raises, not always, it raises a problem as to how that difference is to be articulated.
Well, I think my easy answer is that I think we might want to look a little at how we are doing that now, and whether that difference is indeed justified, if we can still separate them out. But that's...
Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. I enjoyed it. Interesting. So my question is, in the last slide you mentioned that there are like two views, opposite views, like either society or the individual, let's say, or the hybrid or hybrid, I'm not sure what the pronunciation, but you didn't really talk about it. But I wonder, related to that and then moral announcement, if it's possible to make happy the individual and the society at the same time, or if we always, I mean, I know it's a bigger philosophical problem, but if we have to choose, it's like an old problem where both in psychiatric care and in moral enhancement, can we like morally enhance the individual for himself and society, or we have to choose who to make happy?
Well, I think luckily in many cases those two objectives coincide, but there will be cases where it's not. And then this true whole dilemma arises at those moments. So that you have obligations towards the treatment, the patient you are treating, the person you are treating, and you have obligations towards safety. So you, yeah.
But I should give
Okay. Any other? Good. Then we move on. Moral enhancement is really coming under fire here. Jonah told us moral enhancement get real and now more retail. We'll talk about the limits of moral enhancement, so moral enhancement get more humble probably.
Thank you very much for the invitation. My talk will be about the limits of human enhancement and the limits of moral enhancement in particular. And I will start from the fact that in the debate of moral enhancement, it is often supposed that with the scientific and technological development, we could also make people moral. It is giving them the best moral attitude. Although the cost to moral bioenhancement could be very useful in the near future, I don't think that we can make people automatically moral just by using biotechnologies and therefore by simply amplifying the natural disposition. And the same idealization of technology that we find in the bioconservative perspective can also be found in view much more favorable to enhancement. It is important to clarify the kind of critical consideration that I want to propose. My skepticism towards moral bioenhancement is not founded on doubt about scientific and technological development in the area of human enhancement. In my opinion, the idea of moral enhancement is to be reconsidered because ethics is a kind of experience that cannot be construed through technology. In the first part of my speech, I will draw upon some criticism of moral bioenhancement that have already been advanced. Then I shall continue with the more original part, dealing with the weakness of the theory that artificially stimulated empathy could improve behavior and constitute the solution to our natural partiality. First of all, it is not enough to remove or enhance the feelings of people to make them moral, because morality and virtuous behavior don't coincide with natural disposition that govern in an immediate manner human beings in their behavior. What characterizes morality is not the mere necessity of immediate reactions. Morality, and we talked yesterday enough, morality presupposes the ability on our part to respond reflectively to events that occur, and starting from this to ask to ourselves how we must act and live, considering not just our personal interest, but also the interest of other people. And yesterday, Professor Ellis told us a lot about this fact that characterizes morality. The capacity to develop a critical point of view relative to one's passion and sentiment seems possible through experience and personal development, supported by wider society. And I am thinking here of the important moral role of education, but not through biotechnologies that improve feeling of our rational capacities. Indeed, we can enhance our feelings and reason without making people reflective on their behavior and the consequence of their own action. For example, if there is no moral sense, our readiness to sacrifice our interests could become a resource in carrying out wrong action with maximum dedication. Then we can also accept the idea that a specific form of self-sacrifice is altruism, but altruism is not always compatible with the needs and the requests of ethics. I can be ready to help my family, but indifferent to other people. This is the simple fact that I am helpful and compassionate to my mother, brother, and sister doesn't necessarily make me a moral person. Then a number of commonly employed drugs can surely make people less able to inflict harm and sufferings to other people. But I would not say that a person is moral if they lack the sentiments which permit them to approve of their behavior as something really right. Otherwise, in front of a very old sadist, by now unable to inflict harm and suffering, just because he doesn't have the strength to do it, we should call him moral. And we don't call a young psychopath who doesn't commit crime just because he is in jail moral. Otherwise, jail should be considered moral enhancement technology. there is a significant gap between the effect that using such drug may achieve and the claim that people are thereby made more moral. I quoted Sparrow, but I could quote naturally John Harris. It has been said that by enhancing empathy, we will preclude such disastrous outcomes. That is, it would be the appropriate solution to overcome our natural partiality. I don't intend to cast doubt on the important role of empathy for morality. But empathy cannot be considered just a passive disposition of tendency that governs human beings in an immediate and uncontrolled way. It is actually an active inclination, not least because it can become more precise and refined if cultivated. Therefore, we might also imagine that in the future the biotechnologies could amplify and spread our natural and empathetic disposition as much as we want. However, biotechnology cannot offer that kind of essential refinement of our empathy that we can reach by being in relation and in touch with other people. Just by comparing ourselves with other points of view and the life experience of other people, we might develop a more adequate moral sensitivity. It is what other people tell us about their experiences and our behavior that allow us to develop greater ability to see the problem we are facing in and perceive important aspects of the situation which up to that point we have been unaware of. In other words, empathy is a social practice through which we learn to accommodate and to assimilate as much as we can our own sentiment, principles, and feelings to those which we see fixed and rooted in the person whom we are obliged to live and converse, agree them with. And it doesn't mean that we can develop appropriate empathy, as Adam Smith affirmed, just through a lifetime spent gazing in the mirror of society. And this is in line with what David Hume taught about refined empathy. While Rousseau argued that pity is a sheer instinct, the poor moment of nature prior to all reflection, Hume's account of empathy is associated with the idea of refinement of sentiments. Then it is evident that our capacity for empathy can be affected by social prejudices and ideologies living within our society. But this simple fact does confirm that we cannot program the empathy of people just by using biotechnology. That is, we can modify our genetic code to produce more oxytocin, but this doesn't ensure that we will be able to enlarge our empathy to more distant people. Genocidal regimes are extraordinarily successful at dehumanizing their victims, subjecting them to a social death before ever inflicting physical harm. Once the other people are dehumanized, it is more difficult to empathize with them, and killing them can become an act of decency and a moral responsibility. Therefore, we can say that appropriate empathy cannot be obtained just through enhancing biotechnologies, because it seems to be strictly related to our capacity to recognize and overcome our limits and prejudices as far as possible. Only starting from an attitude of unity, we can acquire the ability to learn and expand our horizons within a communication context shared with other people. Only by training or is empathy, and therefore our moral sensitivity can we hope to fully understand the lives of other people and the reason of their behavior. That empathy is not equivalent to morality, not just because we can have a capacity for empathy without having morality or a general point of view. Eventually, there is not intrinsic necessity to find a benevolent action where there is empathy. A person can empathize with someone else but care just about their interest. And this is also in line with what David Hume said about ethics. As Jesse Prince said, the emotions involved in approbation, disapprobation may have greater motivation force than the emotions associated with empathy. The empathy leads to action is actually quite wide. There is finally yet another aspect of morality which cannot be produced by biotechnologies. Morality is also connected to our ability to imagine solutions which can support the interests and the needs of people in an original way. The virtuous character does not have to adapt themselves to preconstituted definition of virtue, but must imagine, using their sensitivity, in what way their behavior can best avoid damage to people and at the same time promote their welfare. Modern moral thought is strictly linked to the idea that each of us has to take responsibility for their action by considering the consequence on others. But we cannot always do this just by rationally calculating what effects we can produce. It is often just through the imagination that we can perceive what is the right action. Sometimes we make mistakes and we have to reconsider our previous conclusion. And by learning from the experience, we can seek new original solutions or be inspired by other people in their personal choice. But often when we deal with different moral claims, there are not other paths. We have to imagine in which way we could combine many divergent interests and needs. But this disposition is not acquired by means of medication or a technological intervention that enhances our ability to reason or feel what other people feel. It is acquired through experience, practice, and last but not least, the encouragement which the individual receives from a society in whose interest it is to have autonomous, enterprising, and above all, responsible citizens. So we are a long way from those perspectives that assume people can become moral only through enhanced empathy produced by technologies. We don't understand how, through biotechnology, technological intervention, enhanced individual should be able to quickly recognize and how which action is right and be motivated to act as a result without any hesitation or second thoughts. And so my conclusion is that we should give up the novel, the science fiction scenarios, and we should come back to discuss about philosophy and moral philosophy. Thank you very much.
Right, got a few minutes for questions. Perhaps I can start off. I liked the tenor of your talk very much, but there was one slide I was a bit concerned about, the one about dehumanized people and we can't empathize so much with them, and killing them might actually be a decent thing to do. What did you have in mind there?
That if we,
What do you mean by dehumanized?
that we cannot have a clear idea about the empathetic capacity of people, because the empathy depends on which kind of society you have. If you live in dehumanizing society, it's more likely that you have not the capacity to empathize with some groups.
I think you had, I think it was Herman Goering who was very famous for saying it's really hard exterminating people. It's really hard to do that, and you know it's tough. But doing right is tough. That's the sort of thing you said. I think that was the sort of point you had in mind.
Yeah, this is the point. And sometimes we don't consider how much we are not able to see what's happened to other people that we don't consider very much. And maybe we have some prejudice, and so we are not able really to empathize. So it is important to understand that our empathetic capacity is not something biological, but it is something cultural too.
Okay.
Well, thanks for the talk. I enjoyed it. I think there's a jump at the end, right? So you go from, look, empathy isn't really going to do the work for us, so we should give up on moral enhancement altogether. But it seems like there's other ways that we could talk about moral enhancement that is not connected to empathy. So, in a 2014 paper, Brian Urban and some others mentioned kind of diminishment as enhancement. And so, if we diminish certain kinds of characteristics like impulsivity or compulsivity, or there's a bunch of different traits that prevent us or lead us to a cratic action, for instance. So, if we recognize something as good, but we have these impulses and we don't do it, it seems as though this is still a legitimate discussion to have, even though it's not connected to empathy. So it seemed like there was a jump from empathy to giving up on the whole project.
I think that we have to distinguish between moral attitudes and motivation. I mean that I can have moral disposition. I would like to give up smoking, and because I think that it is not something good for me or for my relatives, and maybe I need help. Maybe I need this nicotine pack that helped me to follow my conclusion about the right behavior. And in this sense, biotechnology can be really useful. And I think that biotechnology can play an important role with education. But what I intend to say is that we cannot program the morally enhanced people just by using technologies.
Okay, we've got two more questions. Let's have them together. First, the gentleman in the back. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Okay.
Okay. So, some questions of clarification. First, I don't do very quick. First, I don't understand whether your criticisms go in the direction of saying that empathy does not have any role in morality, or that empathy is not all we have to say about morality. And second question is whether you are criticizing an enhancement of empathy, only that one through biotechnologies, or enhancement of empathy in any case as something that can disturb our moral judgment, because it seemed to me that you were speaking about the possibility of enhancing empathy with the model of society and so on and so on. But in this case, it seems to me that reappears the same problem of the possibility of disturbing moral judgments that we have by using biotechnologies. So, for example, a totalitarian regime usually is not only directed to dehumanizing people as such, but dehumanizing some people, while on the other hand, building and increasing empathy and loyalty in society.
Thank you for the question.
I don't think that empathy is our moral judgment. I think that ethics have to do with sentiments and
and the right sensitivity. What I intended to say is that to refine our empathy, we should understand that we can reach to this result just in a social context, learning to consider better the interests and the needs of other people, and accepting that we are not perfect, as yesterday John Harris said, and so we have to recognize our limits, and we have to improve our capacity to recognize ourselves in the mirror of the society, the other people. And just in this way we can improve our empathy, and so become a better people.
Okay, John?
I'm very good at that. Was a hugely elegant paper, and you said a lot of the things that I tried to say, but more eloquently and more economically. But I think you're underestimating the cognitive elements involved with this. A lot of what I get involved with is the impact of new technologies. Thinking what will happen if this is adopted, what will happen if it isn't. And this involves a great deal of cognitive capacity, intelligence, assessing evidence and all that sort of stuff, which you don't get from Humean and the sentiments. With all respect to Humean, and very good respect to Humean.
Perhaps we can leave that as a comment.
Yeah.
Okay. Our next speakers are Anna. Sorry, it is so small here. Alichniewicz. Is your colleague also here? No. Okay. It's just you about. I can't read this. Delusive grail of moral announcement. Sorry.
So, I have already expressed my skepticism concerning moral enhancements several times during our discussion so far. So, I think that this is not surprising that the very type of the presentation I'm delivering is the losing grail of moral enhancement. I would like to start with something that seems to me quite basic. What is the very goal of a moral enhancement? Or what is that supposed goal of moral enhancement? And I think that it is moral progress. So let us begin with what is captured under this heading of moral progress. I think that first of all, three main elements. That there is a change, that change has been brought about by agents, moral agents, and that the new state of the first is better than the previous. And now these changes could be obtained on individual level or social level or both. Let us begin with individual level. What does it mean to be moral progress or morally enhanced? To be more virtuous, okay, but which virtues we should develop? What criteria could we adapt to the circumstances? To behave more morally, okay, but again, what does it mean? Better consequences or better intentions in what we action that we are inclined to obey some moral rules, moral laws, which ones? To have morally better motives, again, what it means, moral better motive, leading to better consequences, or just the ones obeying moral rules. And that is, I think, a kind of system. Social, of course, there is also possible. Let's attempt at ordering our life. Okay, that is actually the thing we have done already, and we are still doing. And what is the result? to Alzheimer's McIntyre. It is greatness. So, moral progress or greatness. If we are trying to look at one of the most influential streams in contemporary moral philosophy and social philosophy, and taking liberal and communitarian tradition, we are meeting quite opposite notions of practical rationality and justice, various notions of good life, also procedural rationality versus substantial rationality, and procedural fin, goodness, against substantial goodness. So, a quite basic disagreement. What is moral progress about? Okay, but let us agree that, for example, there are some desirable virtues in both traditions. Let us begin with that empathy. I have noticed this empathy, in fact, is one of the dominant themes in our debate here during this conference. So let us begin with it. But here there is such a danger of the so-called neurological class. That means that this empathy is just a part of the whole, and it can function quite differently in different forms. And I would like to refer to Emile Gounod's study on empathy. He is MIT cognitive neuroscientist, and he did a very interesting research on empathy in various regions of conflict all over the world. Because of obvious political connotations of his study, it also got some general interest, and it was presented in 2015 New York Times magazine under very evocative type, the brain's empathy gap. Can mapping neural pathways help make friends with our enemies? And what are the findings? Gounod found out that people usually, of course apart from some so-called psychopath, displayed very strong empathy reaction when they were perceiving suffering of the members of their own circle, their own group. This empathy flame was weaker when they were confronted with the suffering of people who were totally stretched. But there was totally muted, no empathy at all. It was called by Gounod empathy gap, when it was suffering of their enemies that was perceived. And to make the things worse, it was especially the case with the ones who displayed especially strong empathy toward the members of their own group. So in fact, it is group identity what matters here. Okay, but again, let us agree that we should develop empathy, nevertheless. Here we are in the middle of my background. Of course, thanks to spectacular progress in cognitive science, neuroscience, we are able to trace some psychological phenomena, but not such a complex phenomenon like empathy. It was, I think, emphasized yesterday in that psychiatric presentations that empathy cannot be reliably traced in any significant neurobiological sense. Okay, so let us agree on something simple, quite simple thing, like for example aggression, and something that this seems to be quite elementary of our psychological aggression is one of that psychological phenomena where we have that neurological pathway recognized. Okay, so let us agree that we should reduce aggression, yes? And now, again, the same questions arise, or social or individual level. Should it be compulsory or should it be elective? If it is elective, of course, there is such a possible detrimental outcome, like it's supposed to enhanced by the ones who remain non-enhanced. When it is on social level, of course, the whole cluster of risk stemming from any compulsory intervention. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Great presentation, by which I mean I couldn't agree more. But there's other people here who don't. Any questions? Any comments? John?
Very interesting presentation. I wasn't clear what you were saying about aggression at the end. I wouldn't agree that aggression is a bad thing. I think we need aggression. We humans need aggression. And we need to channel it in appropriate targets. And I can think of a great number of appropriate targets for that aggression. And we're cultivating it and reserving it for those targets.
I don't think she said that.
I totally agree. Aggression is a very strong psychological drug. And of course, it is definitely something we need. But it is just, I think, such a one of these things that are generally taken for granted. Also in a bioenhancement or moral enhancement or moral bioenhancement debate, that, for example, aggression is such an elementary psychological function. We know a lot about its neurobiology, and maybe it would be okay, or even it would be good to reduce aggression to some acceptable level. But of course, there is another question: which level is acceptable? Yes. So I totally agree that even aggression is not clear from that angle of moral bioenhancement. My point is that there is nothing that could be manipulated in that way, even such an elementary thing like aggression, because aggression, again, total agreement could lead to some totally destructive outcomes, also positive, even constructive outcomes. Yes.
Even for intellectual discussion, I think we need a little pressure.
Oh, absolutely.
Interesting. Any other questions? No? Then, thank you very much. Okay, we've got one more talk tonight, Karolina and Kudlek. And here we're talking about the role of emotions in directing means of moral violence. Let's ask.
Okay, so being the last presenter makes a really hard job for me to say something that hasn't already been said, but I still really hope that I can contribute to this conference in any way. And of course, I know you're all tired and we just can't wait to get over with this and we feel it's mutual. So I will just try to keep this as painless as possible and as short as possible. And let's begin. So maybe the more appropriate title of my talk would be enhancing understanding of emotions in this moral bioenhancement debate. But now it's too late to change that, and I will just stick to the one that is on board. Since a lot lot has already been said about this moral bioenhancement debate. I will just quickly refresh you with just the main things that are important for my proposal, and then I will just skip to the point mainly. And so, simply put, moral bioenhancement is actually a theory devoted to, in a way, bridging the gap between scientific and technological progress achieved by human species during the past few centuries, and in a way, the absence of comparable progress in our species' typical moral psychology. Or maybe we can refer to that just simply as that our moral psychology is outdated. And it seems that our psychological dispositions make us, in a way, ill-equipped to cope with the problems of modern world environment and modern challenges. And these drawbacks all together, this overall lack of moral motivation might eventually cause great harm, as we already heard so many times. And it can be put simply just that we are presented by a serious threat in a way for our survival. At least that is what moral bioenhancement proponents like to claim. And since this mismatch between our psychology and progress makes this serious threat, proponents of moral bioenhancement offer some sort of, I like to call it evolutionary shortcut, or some kind of artificial update that will make us more capable of dealing with modern world issues, just like to make us, help us to deal more easily with these problems in our new, so to say, environment. So what is understood by this concept is actually enhancement of our motivation to act morally by biomedical and pharmacological means, of course. And it seems that this kind of thing is possible thanks to the nature of our morality, which is biologically based, and our moral dispositions, which are biologically based, we share with many non-human animals. It seems that our morality, or the core of morality, as many authors like to call it, consists out of altruistic emotions and a sense of justice. And when something is biologically based, then it can probably be biologically modulated or modified. So proponents of moral bioenhancement suggest, therefore, that knowledge of human genetics and neurobiology should be used to directly improve our moral motivation through modulation of our emotions. So since moral bioenhancement theory is to a significant extent based on the evolutionary psychology, and the central idea of moral bioenhancement is focused on modulation of emotions, such as altruism and sense of justice, I believe that we should look more closely into the role of emotions in this debate, and what evolutionary psychology of emotions has to say about what emotions are, how they function, what is their main, role or whatever. That is the question that I just addressed. And so experts in evolutionary psychology of emotions claim that the brain is a computer, physical system that came into existence to carry out computations which were needed to solve whatever problems of regulating behavior successfully, and all that in ways that will increase our fitness. So, however, many of these diverse programs created other adaptive problems because they ended in some kind of conflict with each other. And to avoid such consequences, the mind must be equipped with another set of special programs, which will, in a way, coordinate or align these other sub-programs and harmonize them in a way that in proper configuration at the right time. And of course, emotions are exactly these programs. They come into the picture at this moment, and they, in a way, superordinate, manage, harmonize, align other adaptive mechanisms of human psychology into the proper configuration at the right time. So since the function that best defines emotions and what they do is mechanism orchestration, I picture this relationship between emotions and other types of mechanisms like this. In a way, I picture it like this. You can, of course, correct me if I'm wrong. So, in a way, we have emotions which are orchestrating over the other mechanisms which are like more basic or something like that, and these mechanisms are in a way playing according to the orchestrator's orders or something like that. So even though it seems plausible that propositions of work by enhancement and use of evolutionary psychology of emotions are compatible, I believe that we should look more closely into it. And I would primarily want to address two, just so to say, risks or something similar that I believe could be emerging from this comparison of emotions, mechanisms, and main ideas from evolutionary psychology and moral enhancement. And the first one I like to call misdirecting the means of enhancement, and the other one is more of a follow-up to the first, and I call it wasting the means of enhancement, and I will just now explain what I mean by first and by the second one. So, as you all already heard on this conference, there are so many things that are objective and that are objective to theory of moral enhancement, but I would like to question maybe something that wasn't already questioned here. So, for example, it is usually objected that it would be impossible to manipulate this such a complex system, such as emotions and brain mechanisms are. This is something regularly we can hear on a daily basis. But I believe, in addition to this, that there are several conditions that should be met in order to implement moral enhancement successfully. And here are some questions that I believe might be important, and maybe proponents of moral enhancement took answers for granted or something like that. So, what I asked myself while doing this research is, do emotions really fully control mechanisms, or just in a way, are they correlated in a way that can really make this successful if we implement moral enhancement in a way that will be successfully. It seems to me that we have to assume some kind of control or transmission or correlation between these, between emotions and mechanisms of human psychology in order to work out. And after that, we must assume that through enhancing emotions, we will be able to affect certain mechanisms which are relevant for moral behavior, moral behavior. And after that, we have to assume that we will be able to affect them in a desired manner and without any negative side effects. So these are like tricky ones. But since I don't believe that pure skepticism is much of an argument, let's take a look at the facts. So, from experts in evolutionary psychology of emotions, we can hear that role of emotions is really important in our life, and numerous reasons can be found for that. And when it comes to moral enhancement, I think emotions might be a bit overestimated. So the fact is that emotions and mechanisms of human psychology are two completely different types of programs which evolved separately and in different phases of evolutionary history. And experts claim that this relationship is likely to be far more sophisticated than previously appreciated. And there are many decades of work ahead for emotion researchers before they are comprehensively met. And also, we should take into account that emotions are activated only in specific evolutionary recurrent situations, and their function is mostly to switch on or off certain mechanisms. So, I believe that this should clearly indicate that emotions don't probably fully control the mechanisms, and that they can affect them only in a number of specific situations. So if emotions evolve as a special class of programs with a test to superordinate these other more basic programs, it is evident that emotions are not basic programs, and that these other programs must be at least to some extent, I don't know, autonomous or something, and also relevant when it comes to regulating behavior. So if we go back to the example of an orchestra and orchestrator that I mentioned earlier, we can see that maybe by enhancing an orchestrator, we can subsequently enhance the overall performance of the band to some extent, but it would still largely depend on musicians, I believe, and their, so to say, individual features. So, for example, if musicians play badly, there isn't much that the conductor can do. Or on the other hand, if musicians are playing well, it is unlikely that the conductor can seriously downgrade the performance, I believe. So along the same lines, emotional modulation could subsequently improve our moral motivation to some extent, but it would still largely depend on the mechanisms and their individual features. So my point is that directing means towards means of moral enhancement, of course, towards emotion. Emotion is at best treating a symptom and not a disease. And now I would like to address to the other part of my risks. So if we take aside this questionable relationship between emotions and mechanisms, and we accept that enhancing emotions could make us more moral, at least to some extent, what does this imply? So let's again imagine that we enhanced our orchestrator and he's now very determined or motivated to enhance the performance of the band. But no matter how hard he tries and no matter how motivated the band becomes, their performance stays mediocre because, for example, their instruments are old. So what I'm trying to say here that there is just no possibility that we can overcome these sorts of drawbacks that are in a way inherited. So in other words, enhancing emotions is, I believe, limited by design of mechanisms which they affect. And this design seems to be out of fashion. If we focus on emotional modulation, I believe we can maybe achieve only small improvement. And unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be enough in the modern world environment, all things considered. And will not eliminate the threat for ultimate disaster, for example. So in order to quickly adapt to the new living conditions, I believe we would have to undergo some sort of thorough revision of our mechanisms and not emotions. So along the same lines, we can consider another simple example that may be more appropriate for the discussion. And for example, if we take into consideration the strengthening of altruism, and let's imagine that you strengthen my altruism, won't I become just more devoted to help? I think that the colleague just before me said something similar. So I think if we put by means of moral enhancement strengthen altruism, we will just keep strengthening it in the direction which is determined by our human nature. So in practice, this means only to strengthen our altruism towards the existing subjects of our moral agency. For example, if I'm devoted to helping my family and you make me more altruistic, won't I just become more devoted to helping my family? So it doesn't necessarily follow that I will be more interested in helping my neighbor's family, or it was more important that I will become more interested in helping some other family in the other part of the world. So since the actual problem of lack of moral motivation lies exactly in our inherent biases towards caring about only the near future and close individuals, for example, I I think that this gap could become even deeper by enhancing our emotions.
Keeping and indeed an unexpected conclusion. I like this.
Sorry, I'm
No,
really,
great.
really
Any
nervous.
questions? Alexander first.
I'm confused, deeply confused, and I try to make a diagrammatic variation of your talk in order to get less confused. So, I think you started to say that emotion is not enough for morality, in a certain sense. I'm not so sure what you mean about emotions, but I skip that part because it didn't even completely sense which type of emotions you're talking about, how they relate to effectiveness and so on and so on. But I'll just make a thought experiment with your talk and say, okay, if it's not enough, is it actually necessary for morality? So, just to give it to an experiment. Like, and I get back to Star Trek. Like, is it that the emotional Kirk is the actual moral being, while the unemotional Spock cannot be a moral agent, or not? Or is it the opposite? Is it exactly the emotional the Kirk that can't be a moral being because it just decides however what comes out of his emotional life, and I'll to make it extreme, and Spock is the only one that's actually moral because he's always with his judgment in the right place. That's a question.
Can I add my impression to yours? Because I think it's completely complementary. Emotions aren't feelings. Okay? Emotions aren't feelings. Emotions have cognitive content. If they didn't have cognitive content, we couldn't tell the emotions apart. We couldn't tell which emotion was which. Okay? So the content can always be abstracted from the emotions. And that gives us an opportunity to solve your helping my family problem. Because it says, what is the point? Well, it begs the question, or raises the question, what is the point of my helping my family? What's the helping you? And then, once you've got to that point, or which, without any feelings at all, you can then say, well, what would you like to generalize this principle? Because what you've adopted in the helping your family is a principle. It's a principle about the need for helping those who need help. Then you can generalize it. The emotions specific. Let's get rid of emotions.
So, well, I was talking about emotions because emotions are like the main part of this discussion, and I wasn't quoting because there is just not enough space and time for that, but proponents of moral enhancement talk exactly about modulation of emotions and primarily about strengthening our altruism and things like that. And I didn't want to go into this other part of discussion that you mentioned, where we actually discuss are emotions at all important for being moral. That is a completely other part of discussion, but I just somehow don't see the connection between enhancing emotions and also becoming more moral. So it is really, really not clear to me. So.
Can I just say in response to what you just said, what is the principle you think is behind looking after my family?
It's understanding the needs of others.
No, the principle is it's family, right? It's family, that's the principle behind it. So you can't really universalize it beyond, well, one should take care of one's family, right? That is the principle behind it. And that's why you're right, I think that altruism is localized.
Caring about your family is just like caring about your genes. It's not moral. There is no space in caring about your family. I don't think it should be discussed in normative ethics. So you're just caring about your needs.
It's something what we must do, and there is nothing moral in a way. Any other comments or questions? Then, this is the end. Many great talks, many interesting discussions, great people. I'm just a bit regretful that we didn't have more time for discussions. But that only shows how interesting everything was. And let me take the opportunity to thank Roger Rakic for this
Thank you all for a wonderful participation in this conference. It was really great. I enjoyed so many presentations and so many discussions along, and I hope you did the same. So thank you. I wish those who depart tomorrow, and I think that the most of you, a safe trip back. Those who will go today for the touristic trip, I wish you a lot of fun, and the others will probably either go alone somewhere or in groups or have a rest in the hotels. So in any case, enjoy your remaining time in Belgrade. You're welcome.
Thank you.